On in.
Okay, hi, my name's Anouska. I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much, Jay, for asking me to speak. And it's something I've said over the years. It's an honor and a privilege to speak at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But every time before I say that, I think about why it's such an honor and why it's such a privilege. And when I look back over my history, and I think about how everyone wanted me to stop speaking. No one was asking me to speak. They were asking me to shut up. Um, and no one was trusting my word as being true. And I think that's why it's such an honor and a privilege to be asked to speak at an AA meeting, because my words are true these days. And I've worked very hard to make that happen. It is not my first instinct to tell the truth, especially when I'm threatened or something in my life is threatened. Um, I was thinking, I was talking to my boyfriend earlier today, and I said, oh, I'm speaking at a meeting and I have to speak for like 48 minutes. And he said, and you're worried about that? Um, so clearly he has the confidence that I can easily speak for well up to an hour and beyond. Um, and I was really thinking today how fortunate I feel. Um, my sobriety date is May 1st, 2003, and my sponsor is Jay Westbrook, and who sponsored me for most of my sobriety. I feel so happy to be here, and I was excited all day to come here, and I didn't prepare at all. In my past, I would have had to prepare for many hours and many days and many rehearsals in front of the mirror to do the kind of performance that would get me the kind of response that I was looking for, which was to feel validated, to feel accepted, to feel loved, to feel whole, if you will. And these days, all the preparation I need is the trudging that I've done along with all of you over the past nearly 22 years. One of my closest friends is here tonight, Natasha, and a couple of sponsees, and my sponsor, of course. And it's just amazing to have so many people I know in the same Zoom room and be able to tell the story. And it's been the same story that I tell to everybody. um, as you might hear, I'm from England, and I grew up in a very faithless family, a family of atheists who had a lot of conviction in their atheism, as many atheists do, I found. And along with the lack of faith came a living in fear and living in character defects a lot. My mother was a survivor of childhood incest at the hand of her father from the age of 5. And she escaped that home when she was 16 because she fell pregnant to somebody else. And she was pregnant and out on the street with nothing at 16 years old. And when I look back at all the struggles that she had, and when I look back at all the struggles that I had along with her, through the lens of Alcoholics Anonymous and the work I've done here, I can see that she had very few tools. And she did really do the best she could, and she was motivated by a strong desire to love and protect and give me the things that she didn't have, and the safety that she didn't have. What I also see is, despite her strong desire to do that, that didn't work. She didn't protect me. She loved me a lot. What I've learned in this program is that love is not enough. And what my sponsor has taught me is that loving feelings are easy, but transforming loving feelings into consistent loving behaviors is what it really takes to express love and to be love. You know, I, when I first came to AA and I read about how this is a disease of warped perception, and I think, you know, I looked up earlier, I was looking up the difference between perception and perspective. And it says that perception is how you interpret sensory information, while perspective is the lens through which you view the world. And I realized that I had a disease of warped perception and also warped perspective. And that wasn't my fault. When you're a child, you learn through copying, right? You learn, that's how we learn to speak. It's how we learn everything, is we watch what's happening and we copy it. And I watched and learned and I copied my mother. My mother was desperately unhappy, very codependent. She had no boundaries. I watched her use her body as a commodity because it's the only thing she had to leverage. And because of that, I had many of her boyfriends come in and out of the house. Some were boyfriends, some were people who just stayed for the night. And I was very displaced and I was very confused. And I wanted more than anything to help my mother to feel whole and help to fix her and to take away the pain. And she would regress. Most of the time she was pretty high functioning, but she would regress periodically because she had very severe PTSD. And I didn't know what PTSD was back then, but now I know what that is. And that allows me to look back and reframe the things that I was so bitter and angry and resentful about, through the lens of a different perception and to have a different perspective. And although I recognize some of her behaviors as having been very, very damaging for me and for my brother, I also recognize that intention is important. And it didn't stop the effect of her behavior and the situations that she put me in, the dangerous situations she put me in, but it did mean that I felt the love from her, even though she couldn't protect me. And as I grew up, you know, I bounced around a lot and I went to 12 different schools. And every time I would go to a new school, I knew that I wouldn't be staying very long. And we would often move house in the middle of the night. She would wake me up in the middle of the night and say, shh, you know, you can bring a couple of things, let's go. And so I would start the day at a new school, and we had those old-fashioned wooden desks that open. And at the end of the day, I would open my desk and take all my books out. And the teacher would say, well, we're going to use those tomorrow. You don't have to bring them with you. And I would say, well, you never know, you never know if we're coming back. And you know, I think, and I never made friends because I never wanted to connect with anybody to then lose them once again. And I desperately wanted to connect, but I wasn't like the other kids. I was incredibly skinny. I think because of the anxiety and the trauma that I was living through, I really found it very difficult to keep weight on. And so I would get teased a great deal. And so I would isolate and I would, make up stories in my head that I was, some kind of a special person and that I didn't need other people. But I desperately craved to be included, to be loved, to be accepted, and to feel whole. Um, and as I started developing into an adolescent, I developed an eating disorder. A lot of the eating disorder I now realize was part of my desire to be in control of something, because so many things that I desperately needed to be in control of were completely out of my control. So I became anorexic. That did not help me to be more included or more inclusive, because the more anorexic I became, the more secretive I became, the more I isolated and separated myself, and the less people wanted to include me. So ultimately, we moved back to London. We'd moved to France for a short time, and then we moved back to London, and that was really a dangerous place for a 15-year-old girl to be on her own, because my mother was away a lot, and I was running around town, and I was in nightclubs. I was in nightclubs at 14, 15, and that kind of, I developed into, like, I wasn't just this scrawny little thing, but I actually like had a few things going for me. So I was getting this attention, and it was amazing. And my mother was reinforcing that. She was saying, that the way that men look at you, that's power, you know? And so I believed her. I believed it was power, and I believed that's what I had, to offer. And I offered it, you know. Uh, and sometimes I gave myself freely, and sometimes I didn't give myself freely, but it was taken from me anyway, right? Because that's what happens. That's what happens if you're not being supervised and you are a young, blonde little girl running around town in nightclubs. During the course of this period of time, I'd always been completely adamant that I didn't ever want to do any drugs. I grew up drinking a little because we were in France and everyone got to drink. Even when you were a child, you got to taste a little bit of champagne or a little bit of wine. And alcohol wasn't really, I tasted it. It wasn't really a thing for me. And something happened uh, after a couple of months of having been in London. And I was introduced to a woman who was such a nice lady, and she was incredibly sophisticated. She was much older than me. I was 15, 16, she was in her 30s. And she was like the sort of older sister that I always wanted. And she was just she just wanted to be my friend. And I really didn't have any friends. So this was very exciting, and she in turn let me know that she was very excited for me to meet her boyfriend. And her boyfriend was American. So but he was going to be coming over pretty soon, And she said, well, he's a philanthropist, and what he really likes to do is help young people. And he's kind of like a magician, like he's like a magic person, and he can do anything. And he can get you anything you want. Do you want it? What do you want? What do you really want, but you don't dare to ask for? And I had told her that I was going to university, and I'd gotten a place at university to study law. And it was actually at the same college that she had been to, this woman. So it was another link, another thing we had in common. And she said, but what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I really want to be a musician. I want to be a singer. And I was embarrassed to tell her because it wasn't really a career that was respected in my family, and it was something that I didn't think was possible for me. Um, and she just said, she's like, well, of course, like, and she rattled off a few of the people that her boyfriend knew, and she said, listen, we'll figure it out. Uh, the boyfriend comes into town, I get a phone call, and she said, you know, he's here. He's here. Can you come now and, you know, have a meeting with him? And so I was very excited. And I remember putting on, and I was like, you know, 85 pounds. And I remember putting on my mother's Chanel suit because I wanted to look like a grown-up, you know, and I wanted to be impressive. So I put on this suit, and it was a little big on me, so it must have kind of looked silly, you know. And it was, you know, it was a time where all the suits had like big shoulder pads in, so I had these big shoulder pads on this tiny little 85-pound girl. And off I went, and you know, I went over to her house, and she opened the door, and this man was sitting in a chair in front of me. And he was on the phone, and he was talking really loud on the phone. Um, and she sort of said, you know, he's finishing up, like, you know, wait. So I stood by the front door, and he got off the phone. And he was, you know, he was so much. He was so charismatic. He was so dominant. And I had a stepfather that was very, very powerful and very dominant. And so I knew how to be, you know, with this man, because he was a businessman and I was a businesswoman in my, you know, I was a 16-year-old businesswoman in my shoulder pads. And then the woman rattled off some of my accolades and said, and complimented me endlessly and said, like, she's just so incredible. And, you know, what do you think? I mean, how can we help her? And he sort of whispered a few things to her, and she's like, oh, that's a good idea. And then she said, oh, she's also very, very strong. She does like martial arts. For someone so small, she's very strong. And he said, oh, she said, why don't you go over and just, like, he just had socks on. So give his feet a little squeeze to show how strong you are. And I was like, oh, but these people were my parents' age, and I was raised to do what I was told by adults. So I did. And then suddenly his phone rang again, and the woman said, you know, oh, like, go, you know, we're done, you know. And I was like, oh, okay. So I left, and I was kind of confused. And I told my mother about this interview that I had, and I got home and she asked me how it went. I said, I think it went well, you know, I don't know. And then the woman called me and she said, that was great. You know, you did so well and he loved you. And this is great, you know. Anyway, a week or so went by, and she called and she said, listen, she said, I'm wondering if you can help me because I'm in a bit of a panic. She said, you know, my boyfriend gets a massage every day. And I'm wondering if I know that you're not a massage therapist, but I'm wondering if you can come because the massage therapist is canceled. And I sort of hesitated, and she said, you'd really be helping me. I really need you to do this. So I went over and I massaged this guy. And it was strange, but I'd never massaged anyone before. And I certainly hadn't massaged a man. I'd massaged my mother when I was a kid, you know. So I didn't know what was meant to happen. And um and that wasn't the last time that happened. And that wasn't the last time that and it got worse. And it got gradually worse. And during that period of time, I started drinking more heavily. I started using cocaine that I'd never really, I really had a big aversion to drugs. But I started I started using drugs very regularly. And what I realize now is I started disassociating. And a lot of the and I don't by any means think that what happened to me made me a drug addict or an alcoholic, but I also know that it didn't help. And that situation went on for about 10 years. And it went into different countries, and I now understand that that's called trafficking. And I also, and what's crazy about that situation is when I finally got sober at 26, 27, and I found AA, for the first couple of years, you know, sponsors and people would ask me if I'd ever had any kind of abuse, if I'd ever been raped. And I would say no, no. And I didn't know what that was. You know, I didn't know that that's what that was. And so my alcoholism was a huge help to me. My alcoholism allowed me to block out the things that I was not ready to deal with. And I was also not ready to have intervened on. And so I was able to get through what I needed to get through until I was ready to extricate myself, until I was old enough that I felt like I had enough strength. And it wasn't when I got sober that I immediately extricated myself. It took a little longer. And through getting sober and hearing other stories, I started to understand. I started to understand not only what had happened to me, but also that I wasn't alone, and that there was this incredible possibility in these rooms, this incredible opportunity to be able to speak my truth about what had happened and to be able to release the pain. And through doing step work, through also seeking outside help. And I never would have sought outside help had it not been for the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, this was the place I learned to ask for help, to receive help, and to be of help to others. You know, practicing these principles in all my affairs is incredibly important to me. Having purpose in my life. I meet so many people who they're just lost. You know, they have no purpose. And thankfully, I don't remember a time that I haven't had purpose in the past 21 years, because every day my purpose is to carry this message. Whether I'm in an AA meeting or outside of it, I'm representing, and I take that role really seriously. That's a huge responsibility. And I love having responsibility, you know? I really do. I take great pride in it. And one of the things I always wanted was to be a mother. And through, you know, through some of the things that happened to me, I was pregnant multiple times while I was using and drinking. And I wanted so much to hold on to those pregnancies and to be a mother. But I also, mostly it was with abusive partners. And I knew that I didn't have what was necessary to be a good mother. I didn't have the tools. And I knew that I would be repeating the same patterns and passing down the same generational trauma and continuing a trajectory of suffering. But it was very painful. It was very painful to want something so much, but know that I wasn't up to the job. And after I got about 9, 10 years sober, I realized that I was ready, you know, and I was ready to be able to offer myself to a child in a way that had not been offered to me by my mother, that I would not make her responsible for me, for my feelings, for my experience, that I would not need to be her friend, that I would not need to be validated by her. And I had a beautiful baby girl who's about to turn 11 on Tuesday. And talking about sort of the lens, the perspective and the lens through which I view the world, the lens through which I view the world completely changed when I became a mother. I felt like I understood on a whole different level how important my behavior is, because someone's watching me and they're copying me and they're learning from me. And it's my greatest job and my greatest privilege to be able to parent her. And, you know, through this program, I discovered a relationship with a higher power that isn't conventional, but it works for me. And the closest thing that I've ever had to truly feeling connected to God was the day that my daughter was born. And because I grew up with atheists, I rarely use the word, you know, I don't go around speaking about God very much because it just wasn't something that I was raised with, and it's uncomfortable. Like, it's even uncomfortable in my mouth, you know. But when my daughter was born, I said, I can feel God on her because she was just with him. And, you know, I always say that I practiced on my sponsees to be a parent. And, you know, and to practice that incredible, like, feeling of unconditional love that I have for my sponsees, that I still have for my sponsees. But also to not be the friend, to be the person who is there to set an example and to model good behavior. And also to be the person who models how to be wrong. You know, I learned in these rooms how to be wrong, how to admit that I'm wrong, how to make amends promptly, and in a way that gives, it's my dog, in a way that gives the person receiving the amends the greatest chance of relief. You know, all my sorries used to be about me. I work in recovery these days, in mental health and recovery. And I love my job. You know, I love my job. Most of the women that I work with have been traumatized. Most of the women I meet in AA have been traumatized. And there's a way forward. And I know that for sure. There's a way out of suffering. And the way is through taking responsibility for myself, through acknowledging and really feeling all those painful feelings but also acknowledging that I choose my behavior, you know? And so often when I look back, I was just reacting to things. I was just, this has happened. And I would just, there was no pause. There was just like, it was like a demon was coming out of me. When something would happen, I would just go into this volatile reaction, whether it was self-destructive or, destructive to others. I just couldn't hold it.
They're deep.
And thank you. And going through the 12 steps, the first couple of years in AA, I didn't do any step work. It was all I could do just to hold on to my seat and get through the days. I would cry the whole time. I would lie the whole time. I still wasn't ready to be truly honest. And I think, honesty has really been it's come in layers. And at every stage of my sobriety, I thought I was being absolutely honest. And every year that goes by, I look back on the last year and realize, how much more honest I could have been with myself, with others. And so it really is, as they say, one of those peeling the layers of the onion. And now through doing step work, I see my patterns. I see them very clearly. I see my defects. And when they creep up on me, I feel uncomfortable in my body, you know, when I'm about to say something that isn't authentic, when I'm about to do something that isn't that's based in like self-interest. If I'm trying to slightly manipulate a situation, my body actually feels uncomfortable. And and it's more important to me now to be authentic than it is to feel good. And the crazy thing is, when I'm authentic now, that's when I feel really good, you know? Um, I remember a friend of mine always talks about praying and meditating and the 11th step. And he says, if you're not feeling connected to your higher power and you're praying and meditating, then you need to pray and meditate differently, whether that's more or less or in a different setting, but you need to try something different. And in this program, I've learned to be curious about different ways of doing things. I'm very attached to being to what I know or what I think I know. And in this program, I've learned that there can be lots of different ways to do things. There can be many different solutions to a problem. And when I allow myself to be curious, I soften and suddenly more options are available to me. And some of those paths that I never could have walked down before have been the key to unlocking parts of myself that I didn't even think existed, And this incredible softening has allowed me to have these amazing friendships, these amazing relationships, I'm Russia, to be a good friend, to be reliable. I think I'm a good mother, you know, and I didn't choose the best partner to have a child with. But I wanted a child before it was too late. And I knew it wasn't the best person. but that's the choice I made, and I was ready to have a child, but I wasn't ready to choose a good guy yet to do it with. So, but that's okay, because I have this amazing kid. And her father's not easy. Not easy for her, not easy for me. And along with that difficulty, at the moment that I'm experiencing difficulty and watching my daughter struggle with her dad, feeling my own struggle with him, I know that I can do it. I know that we can get through. And because I know that, my daughter knows it too. And she believes me because I'm being authentic. You know, I'm not bluffing my way through life anymore. And because of the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, because of my ability to be accountable and responsible, a couple of years ago, I was asked, well, I wasn't asked, I was compelled by the state of New York to testify against one of my perpetrators. And there were 4 women who testified out of hundreds. And I know that I was asked because I'm sober. And I know that I was able to show up because I'm sober. And I know part of the reason that that person is now in prison is because I'm sober. I also know out of the 4 of us that shortly after the trial, one of the women overdosed and died. And I know that she was an alcoholic just like me. And I know that that could have been my destiny, that could have been my fate, that could have been how I ended up. And it is a crazy and an incredible stroke of luck that I ended up here and not where she is. That I get to work with women and walk alongside them through this journey, and I get to have intimacy in the truest sense, and to experience loving and receiving love from people. I talk to my sponsor a couple of times a week, at least, and I talk to my sponsees, and I talk to my friends, and I just have this incredibly rich life. And I co-journey with sadness still, and it's through working with Jay that I've understood what co-journeying with sadness is. And it's through watching other people walk through hard things. I mean, I really just didn't have the manual before, I just thought everybody else knew what they were doing. And I realize now there's no special trick to it. It really is just a moment at a time. And if you don't know, ask somebody who looks like they know what they're doing. If you're new here, it's like being parented by the most incredible parents, because we have like a group conscience of parenting here. We have traditions that keep us safe. We have steps that help us maintain sobriety and create and cultivate lasting and meaningful change. I didn't come here to be the same without my drugs and my alcohol. I came here for a different experience. And that's what I got. And when people say that their life is beyond their wildest dreams, that's true for me. You know, I have a life I didn't know I wanted. I have, you know, I get up at 4:45 every morning. I mean, I was never in bed by 4:45 in the morning, you know, and I fall asleep with my daughter at 8:30 p.m. and and I and I have these moments in my life every day where I can't believe how lucky I am. I can't believe that I could have missed this, you know, and I could have been that other woman. And I could have been just another casualty. And this is just, it's just the best thing. And I can't believe that, I mean, I want everyone to go to AA, you know? And it's funny because with my work, you know, I have to sort of say, well, you know, AA isn't the only way. And in my head, I'm like, it is, it's the best way, you know? because I know that AA works, you know. It says in our book, you know, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. I think it's like that they just have to say rarely. I've never seen this program fail anybody. I've seen people not do it the same way I've seen people not go to the gym and then complain that they're not getting fit. I've seen people not do the work, you know. I've been the person not doing the work. And when I don't do the work, I'm not very happy. I'm not very grateful. I'm not
5 minutes.
5. Thank you. And so I don't stray far away from this program, you know? And thank goodness I've surrounded myself with people who don't allow me to stray very far. I mean, you know, if it's more than a couple of days where I haven't spoken to Jay or I haven't spoken to Natasha or whatever, then they call me, you know, what's going on with you? And that's part of my life now. I do the same. I reciprocate, you know. I take care of people, not in a codependent way. Not like, oh, I'm going to do this for you, what's coming to me, but in a way of like, hey, like we care about each other, and caring is action. You know, caring is checking in and walking alongside one another. You know, I learned here that you can't walk for someone else and you can't walk on someone else. You can walk beside somebody. And if you're doing it right, it feels good, you know? And I wish my mother had gotten this message. She's not really an alcoholic, but she has a bunch of other stuff. And I see my brother who grew up in the same family as me, and he's so angry, you know, he's so angry with our mother. And it's just, I don't want to hold on to that. You know, when that anger fills up inside of me and burns in my chest, I don't want to hold on to it. I want to release it. And this is the place that I found I can do that. Do my writing, take an action, get out of myself, meditate, pray. And for me, praying, you know, it just brings me present. If I say a prayer, it's not to change God's will, it's to change me. And today I am a changed person. I am a changed woman. I'm somebody that I'm proud of today. And I'm so thankful for the people like Jay, like Natasha, like Marshall, like my sponsees who walk alongside me and help me to be a person I can be proud of and remind me when I forget. So it's been such a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm so grateful. It made my whole day, and I was excited all day. So thank you. Thank you, Jay, for asking me, and it's lovely to be here.
Yay. Oh my God, I love you so much.